Omar. Hi, this is Bruce, and we're at the lobster dock that is about 3 kilometers from my house. And we're going to buy, cook, and eat lobster. But first, we have to buy it. That's my friend Tim.
International star.
Oh, heaven. Why would you want to do that?
Because it's interesting.
Because it's
Tim runs the lobster dock.
Oh. So, what are you up to today?
Do you have any hard shells?
We do. We do.
I want one of each.
One of each.
Yeah.
Maine lobsters come in 2 varieties. One are called hard shells because their shells are really hard, and the other is called soft shell because their shells are soft.
Well,
Lobsters
the
shed
differences
their
in
shells every year,
eating them.
and then they grow a new shell that's bigger. And after they've just recently grown their new shell, it's soft. But the lobster that's inside the soft shell doesn't fill up the shell because it's still a small lobster, and it will grow throughout the course of the year. We start seeing soft shell lobsters middle to late June because that's when they have shed their shells and grown a new one, and the lobstermen start to catch them.
Okay.
But you can still find hard shells as we are here. Now Tim's taken the bin out and you can see all of those lobsters. The plastic bins typically will be filled with 40 kilograms of lobsters in each. This one doesn't quite have 40 kilograms. You can see I'm pointing out a big claw on a lobster, and I like that. This is the fun part because you can look through the lobsters and pick out exactly the one that you want. Now that's a really big one that he's taken out, and that was the one that I saw with the big claw. But Tim says that that's actually a smaller lobster than that one, and it is. But the interesting thing is, the larger one
we'll go with
is
the bigger
a
one.
female.
You want to go with the bigger one?
Sure, why not?
All right. Well, that's even a female.
You can tell the females
really?
because their claws are smaller, because they're typically
Okay,
not
now
as
tell me again
aggressive,
how you can tell.
and their tails are wider, and it has little grabbers there, and that helps them mate with the males. And see, the male lobster has a thinner tail,
Yep.
but it has one really big claw.
Now, how
Okay,
big
we're
is the
going to look at
you're
that one. I
holding?
just asked him how big it was. So he's going to take it over and put it on the scale.
Ooh,
We're going to find
no, I
that
don't
that
need
is a
much.
3.5-pound lobster.
No, I don't need that much.
And that's
Let's
too
go
big.
with the big clawed boy
The
who's a
the
little
boy
bit
that I
small.
looked at before that had the
Yeah.
big claw, and he is a boy because he has the big claw.
2.5 or so.
Tim says he's going to be about 2.5 pounds, but we'll take him
There's the one of them.
and we'll put him over by the side. Tim will close up the bin of hard shells. And then you see, Tim knows that I like big lobsters. And so typically he will have a bin that has fewer lobsters in it, but they'll be big ones. Now this is a bin of soft shells that he's hauling out now. And there aren't as many. But I can look at them, and I'm looking at the claws, and I can tell the men from the women. And I see a couple of boys in there that look pretty good sized. And Tim is actually the good spotter, but he's an expert. He does it all the time.
Sure, why not?
So he says, that one looks pretty good, and that one looks pretty good. That's smaller. He says, yeah, that's the one. Yep, he's got the big claw.
Let's go with the good claw.
Yeah, so we're going to go with the good claw.
Ready?
Then he puts them in a bag. The scale already reads 2.5 pounds for the hard shell.
Nope.
All right. 2.5.
And we'll add the soft shell. And the scale reads
Looks like he's 2.
4.5 pounds. So the soft shell is 2 pounds. So Tim has to figure out the price. Hard shells cost more per pound than soft shells because there's more meat. So the hard shells are $7 a pound, and that's my price, and I get a special price. And the soft shells are $5 a pound. So by the time Tim does the arithmetic,
That comes to $27.
it's $27. He'll close up the bin of the soft shells and put it back in the water.
Started to get into today.
You have to keep lobsters alive, and as long as you have them in the plastic bins in the water, they're fine.
Plastic.
Okay, there's 20.
It's too bad my sound is so noisy, but it ended up being a windy day on the dock, which is too bad.
Well,
But we do the best we can.
20 more.
All right, we got
So I give Tim $40, and he will give me $13 and change. The lobster industry in Maine is huge. And this year, the fishing for lobster has not been as good as in prior years. And that's a problem because there are many people who try to make a living by fishing for lobster. They use big rectangular traps that are about the size of the plastic bins, and they put fish inside as bait, and the lobsters can crawl in because they've got mesh on them, and the lobsters can crawl in, and then they can't escape. And the boats come around and they haul the lobsters off the bottom in the traps, and they take the lobsters out. They discard and throw back anything that's under 1 pound, and they will also throw back large females or any female that is carrying eggs, because that's the future. So Tim gave me the bag, and I can stroll back up to the dock. I went at high tide, so it's easy to stroll along. When it's low tide, that's a very steep walkway. And that's how we buy lobster. And it's really fun. I really
You'll be a
enjoy
star.
well,
going to buy lobster. Tim is a nice guy. He knows a lot. And
Well, I don't
I've
think
learned a
anybody
lot
needs
from
to
him.
be a star.
So I just told him I'm going to make him a star
Thank you. I certainly will.
and that I will enjoy
I will.
the lobsters.
Bye now.
And so now we'll take them home and cook them. I have a big pot that I put on the stove, and it's got 6 centimeters, no, 15 centimeters of water in it. And I brought that to a boil. You have to cook lobsters while they're still alive. There is a way that you can kill them just before putting them into the pot by cutting their heads with a knife, but maybe it's cruelty. I don't do that. Lobsters have a very, very primitive nervous system. They don't feel pain, so you can put them in boiling water and they're not going to feel it. So there was our soft shell. And now here is the hard shell, our big boy. Now you can see that they put rubber bands on the claws because if a claw nips you, it hurts. And they don't tend to want to let go. So the fishermen put rubber bands on them when they catch them and keep them and transfer them to the plastic bins. I'm setting the timer for 15 minutes. The water's now not boiling because I put in room temperature lobsters. But 15 minutes have gone by through the magic of editing, and we pour the water out and the lobsters into my sink. And there they are. They're cooked. They're nice and red. Through the magic of editing, the water is now drained. The hard shell is on the left. It's a little bit deeper red. The soft shell is on the right. The first thing we'll do is snip the rubber bands. I have so many that I've kept that I don't need any more. And then we'll put it on my cutting board. And then we get them ready to eat. We'll do that with a soft shell first. We'll move the hard shell out of the way and ready with a soft shell. And I have these metal bowls. and they hold in. There's usually a lot of moisture that comes off, so it's good to have a bowl. So first we detach the tail, and these are still hot. Remember, they came out of boiling water. Ouch! And then we can detach the claws. And then on soft shells, you remember how I said that the lobster doesn't fill up the shell? Well, that's especially true in the claws. So what we have to do is trim the claws and cut them so that the water can drain out of them. We'll clean away a little bit of the gunk. The gunk is actually edible, but I don't really like it. It's basically lobster guts. Now, I have a different bowl, and I have my hard shell. I don't need to cut the tips off the claws of the hard shell because that shell is full of claw meat. Still hot. So we'll take the tail off. And then with a hard shell, since the shell is so hard, even though I'm going to eat it with a nutcracker at the table, I still take a hammer and crack the shell with the hammer. And I put a towel over it so it doesn't splatter all over the place. So I've cracked the body because we do eat the body. I'll show you how we do that in a minute. And then I'll crack the tail. That will make it easier to get the tail meat out. Then I'll also crack the claws. And when I look at it, I can sort of tell what's cracked enough, and that's good. Yep, cracked on the bottom. We'll do a little bit more. We also crack the part that's attached to the claw. Those are called knuckles, and knuckle meat is wonderful. There is a sandwich that you can buy at many places in Maine called a lobster roll, and it's lobster meat on a hot dog bun, basically. And they usually use claw meat and knuckle meat for lobster rolls, and they can be just truly wonderful. So we can clean up a few of the splatters that I got on me, even though I had the towel over it, and we're ready to eat. So we'll start with the soft shell. And of course, they're messy to eat, so you need a bib. Sadly, this camera is a little bit out of focus, but when I actually lift the lobster, it comes into focus. So the first thing we can do is take the body out of the body shell. And it still has the legs attached. And I like to start by eating the meat in the legs and then the body. And there's not much meat there, and you kind of have to break it apart a little bit, as I'm doing there, and separate the joints. And what would basically be in the thigh of the leg, there's a little bit of meat. Now I've got a special implement there that will shove that little tiny round thing of meat out. And that's a good place to start. I consider it sort of a warm-up for eating the lobster. And so I'll go through and disconnect each leg from the body, dig out the little bit of meat, and eat it. So that takes a minute or two, but usually I'm not eating lobster alone. All right, so I finished the legs, and now we have the body, and you can start to pick out little round pieces of meat, which would basically be where the legs connect to the body. And since there's muscle there to help move the legs, you can take that meat out. There's a little bit more that hides, and the skeleton of a lobster is made out of cartilage, so it's very soft. The strength comes from the shell itself. So you can get in there and dig out the meat, and there's usually a fair bit of body meat. It's worth the trouble. But again, these are just little bits, and I sort of consider it a warm-up. So we've finished with the body, pretty much. That's the head. We don't need to do anything with that. And so now, on to the claws. The first thing is to tear the thumb off the claw, and sometimes the little bit of meat that's in the thumb comes out like that did, and I can just eat it. And then because this is a soft shell, I can peel it with my fingers and crack it and get at the meat that's inside. I'll disconnect the knuckle and push that claw meat in, but you can see it's fairly small compared to the size of the claw. So we'll dip that in some butter. I love melted butter, and often I put a little bit of lemon juice in the butter, and that's good too. And then you eat a claw, and it's delicious. I always have a stack of paper towels at the table that help me keep myself and everything else a little clean. So that, I peeled off the knuckle. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm on the knuckle now, and I'm peeling the knuckle to get at the meat inside it. I love knuckle meat. It's enough to dip in butter, and then you eat it, and it's delicious. And now onto the big claw. We'll tear off the thumb. And in this case, the thumb meat stayed in there, and it stayed attached to the entire claw, so I could pull it all out at once and eat it with lots of nice melted butter. Yum, yum. Now we'll break off the knuckle. And get at the knuckle meat. It's tough because it's got spines, and the spines dig into your fingers, and they hurt. But you can peel, because it's a soft shell, the shell away, and get at the knuckle meat. It's good to have a nice big bowl to put the shells in, because that's all garbage. Knuckle meat. Now, since a lot of stuff is accumulated in my bowl, I'll empty the bowl, and now we'll do the lobster tail. I start by squeezing the tail, and that cracks the shell. And then I can go and peel the shell wide, and that basically breaks it all apart. And when I've broken that apart enough, I can take the lobster tail meat out of the shell. Now, the little tail feathers have meat inside them. There's a piece of meat. I'll eat it. Peel the tail feather. Sometimes it stays in there. Sometimes it's not. But you have 4 tail feathers that you can basically peel and get a little bit of meat out, and it's worth the trouble. Leave nothing to waste. And now, I don't know if you've ever peeled and deveined shrimp, but you can peel this strip of meat off the tail, and inside is what in a shrimp would be called the vein. I suppose we can call that here, but what it really is lobster poop. And it is edible. A lot of people eat it. I don't choose to, so I clean it out. I use my little tool to sort of scrape as much out as I can. And then I'll take a paper towel and clean the rest. And I'll clean it off that little strip of meat because it's still good lobster tail meat. And that's a good place to start because we can dip that in our wonderful melted butter and eat it. I like to break the tail into pieces, and I'll dip each piece in butter and take a bite. I'm actually eating this awfully fast compared to what I usually do because I really want to savor lobster. And like I said, I usually have friends over when I have lobster anyway, or I usually go to friends to have lobster. And so we have plenty of people and we talk and have a good time. Ah, delicious. Another paper towel to clean up with because my hands are covered with lobster juice and melted butter. A little tap at the mouth. Clean up my table a little bit, put that in the garbage, and I can get this plate out of the way and get the hard shell. Oh, it was such a sacrifice to have to eat 2 lobsters in order to make this video. You can see he's a little bit bigger boy. He fills up that plate a little bit more. But to eat it is the same. I'll show you just the highlights of it because it's basically the same as a soft shell, but you have to do some different things because the shell is so hard. The first thing is to remove the body from the body shell. There we go. That goes into the garbage. And it's the same thing. You take the legs and eat the meat from the legs. So I did that, and now I'm back at the claw. There's the thumb meat that stayed in there, so I use my little implement to get it out, and I eat the meat from the thumb. And then remember that I cracked it, and it fell apart, and so all of the claw meat came out at once. And that's a big slab of meat, and claw meat, as I said, is delicious. I think it's my favorite, although I might like knuckle meat better. Now, there is a lively argument between people who think hard shell lobsters taste better or whether soft shell lobsters taste better. I think in this comparison, making this video, that soft shell lobster is just a little bit sweeter, but I would not turn any of them down. So there, I've got my nutcracker because I didn't bang it enough, and I'm trying to crack the knuckle enough to where I can get inside it and get the meat out, and it's not easy. You can see me struggle with it. Back to the nutcracker. So a hard shell takes more work. Is it worth it? Of course. So there I can dig in with my little tool, and I can get out a nice slab of knuckle meat that I'll just dump directly into the butter. So on to the other claw. Take the thumb off. The meat stayed with the rest of the claw this time from the thumb. There's where I banged it. I can peel those bits of shell off fairly easily, and now I'm trying to get the claw meat out. How am I going to do that? Well, I can push it that way and try to get it out that hole. Well, we'll take the nutcrackers and see if I can crack the end of the claw or someplace along the claw so that I can get more shell off and get the claw meat out. Almost. Almost. Okay, here it comes. There, it's claw meat. But as you can see, it's much bigger than the soft shell claw. And that shows the difference between hard shells and soft shells. So we ate the claw, and now we're working on the tail. Same thing. We'll eat the feathers. A little bit of meat there. And then we'll try to get at the tail meat. So we'll see if we can crack it. I banged it. We'll see if we can crack it more with our hands. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and then we can peel it and sort of spray it all over the place. And and then we're trying to break it apart. We'll see if we can squeeze it. Oh, yeah, cracked it a little bit more. And that's the bottom of the tail. And I should be able to get this out now. We'll peel that away. Maine ships only hard-shell lobsters because with the soft shell won't survive shipping, and so the lobster will die. And as I said, you have to cook lobsters when they're alive. So finally, I got the tail out. We can peel off that layer. And devein it. But that's basically it. You've seen me eat a lobster tail. And so thank you